I just want to kind of have a quick little discussion about religion and morality and how they're kind of connected together. I was watching a good 2 hour long debate, and I watched most of it between William Lane Craig and Sam Harris, where they were pretty much talking about religion and morality. And Craig was pretty much saying that if God exists, and there's a good foundation for objective morality, and if God does not exist, then there's no real foundation of objective morality. There's no real grounds for saying that the human race is fundamentally objectively good. Um, I would consider myself one that I pretty much will argue that virtue ethics is the way to go. If you're going to try and discuss, you know, objective duties and obligations and imperatives and all that stuff, and also discuss whether there are objective moral values or not. Well, actually, if you're going to try and discuss moral obligations and duties, you're either going to be a deontologist with ethics or a consequentialist. Consequentialists are pretty much those who say that we should do things based upon, or we should act because certain actions will lead to a certain consequence. Now, this we would group into the whole consequentialist thing, the ideas of utilitarianism and stuff like that, and desire stuff like that, and acting based on desire. Now, what's grouped in there is not only the idea of acting based upon personal desire or personal utility, but also other things too, or for personal consequences among the world. Deontology, on the other hand, is going to say that you should be you should be doing certain duties or obligations because it's right and it's good, because that's the way it's supposed to be. Or even further, that's what God has commanded, and thus that is the good of the world. Kant, for one, had his categorical imperative, which pretty much was one of those deontological, well, argued sometimes not to be deontological, but I would argue that it is deontological, that we should do these things because it's right. Not because it'll be good for these people, or not because it'll be not because it'll bring about certain consequences, but just because it's right and it's good, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So that's pretty much arguing that there are objective moral values or objective moral objective moral good and right. So that's pretty much what that is arguing. And there's a lot of Christian or religious debate which is going to, argue things pretty much based upon on the deontological side. There's Christian virtue ethics and there's Christian deontological ethics as well. But a lot of what is discussed is Christian morality based upon whether God exists or not, and that if God exists, then there is objective morality. Now, I would be one to argue the virtue ethics position. That is there's of the main three normative ethics positions: consequentialism, deontology, and virtue ethics. I would be one to argue the virtue ethics position, and this is not because I am an atheist, or it's not because I don't think that morality should be, or it's not because I don't think that there should be objective morality or not. It's just because I think that the other two theories are ones that would not really get us anywhere. I think that a normative theory in ethics, which is going to prescribe us certain things to do, is one that's going to stretch among various religious beliefs. So I'm trying to say that virtue ethics is the way that we should be saying that we should be acting. We should be using virtue ethics and virtue theory to tell everyone, or to say to everyone that this is how we should be acting. We should be acting upon virtues, not upon certain obligations which come from God or anything like that. Now, I think that if you happen to be a Christian and are, using virtue ethics, then those two things work together. There's, if you were participating in the whole virtue, in certain virtue prescription, and we're acting upon practical reason and virtues, building up a certain disposition and habit, and leading toward a certain kind of flourishing, then your actions upon virtues and your ethical actions upon virtues and your religious belief in a Christian God would not conflict. They would actually coincide very well. But the point is, I'm trying to discuss here that not only that I'm not trying to argue here that virtue ethics is better than deontology. First of all, I don't think that consequentialism holds any validity, or I don't think that it's really a good theory at all. So I would like to discount that one immediately. And I have various videos in my ethics playlist discussing that, and I can discuss that later. Pretty much that brings us to deontology and virtue ethics, which is where we're going to discuss, the religion and ethics coincidence. And most of the time, from what I've seen, it has happened that Christian or theist morality resides in deontology. It says that their religion and morality, let's use for example Christianity, is going to say that because God exists, there are a set of objective moral values which govern how each of us should do, or how each of us should act in our daily life. And those things exist not only because God created them as well as the rest of the world, but because those things are right, and they are right and good because God created them. That would be the deontological position. The virtue position doesn't change whether there is religion attached to it or not. I don't think. And I don't think it should change. So it is my opinion that religion should be separated from ethics. Now, I am a theist and I am a Christian, but I highly believe that ethics needs to be separated from religion. What we believe as to whether there is a God or not, and how we act and why we act, should be separated. And this is because I think that there are people who don't believe in gods, who are good people, and who do very good things. And second of all, people who are atheists are not going to be convinced to act a certain way just because it's right or it's good, or because God created these things. An atheist is not going to be convinced. And an atheist is not going to be convinced of that he or she should adopt a set of moral obligations because this set of obligations is right and good, and that God created them as He created the rest of the world. An atheist will not be convinced by that. More rather, he will be angered by that, saying, "Why are you? Why should that apply to me? It doesn't. I don't believe in your God. Why should I abide by this?" So then he'll be like, "You know what? I don't agree with this. So I think that maybe I should just act upon my own desires, or the world's desires, or whatever." Virtue ethics, however, merely gives you virtues to act upon. It gives you reasons to act because it's virtuous, or it gives you virtues to act upon, or ways to live because it's virtuous. And it's based upon practical reason. It's based upon not just virtues because God created these virtues, or so on, so on. It's not saying you should act upon these virtues just because they're virtuous and that's it. It's based upon practical reason, and we should act upon these things because it's reasonable, and it's based upon reason and logic that we should act this way. And furthermore, it leads to a certain flourishing, not only of one person, but if done well, upon many people. So, the whole idea of virtue ethics is not going to apply just to a certain religious group, but it will apply to everybody, and I can convince anybody to act this way, regardless of whether they believe in a God or not. So, I believe that the goal in normative ethics is to create and verify a good prescription, to create and verify a good set of rules, or a good set of actions that we should do, which will lead us to a lot of us making, which will lead us to a certain sort of world, which will say that, well, this is the better thing to do than this. Acting upon practically reasonable virtue is better than acting upon self-desire or unverified moral obligations. Virtue ethics can be convinced. I can convince, more than just a certain religious group. I can convince atheists, theists, deists. It doesn't matter. So, the goal of a certain normative theory is to create a certain way of acting, which will make things better. Not make things better for one person, but even better for many people. So this is why I think religion and ethics need to be separated. Because if we don't separate them, then religion is going to govern ethics, and it's going to make ethics only apply to certain religious groups, and which will make ethics not really be an issue anymore. It will make normative ethics not really considered at all by anybody except a certain religious group. And it's even more possible that these religious groups could, or that these non-religious groups could become possibly maybe a little bit more religious than they were if we just separate the two and make actions happen just because of the certain moral prescription and nothing else.